Hello, can everyone hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Alright, anyone have any good games that show some interesting Joseki choices?
Not sure we'll call them interesting.
Just games where you tried to make Joseki choices?
Yes to that one.
The games where you didn't just play the first Joseki that you always play. Can you post a link?
A second, I'm checking this is the right one.
You guys hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Fueling the Clossi class channel.
Okay.
Not sure if
Alright.
it's that interesting though.
Review started.
Well, mostly it's just going to be like, how are we picking our Josekis? Okay.
Where am I? Is there something I'm supposed to be able to see right now?
Not yet. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, can you see what I'm doing?
I can see it now, yes.
Alright, right off the bat, we have an interesting choice. Do we want the A corner or the B corner?
Right there. I guess I will aiming to the B corner, but depends on what he will play next.
Why?
I'd say
Because I'm aiming to do a
I say you want the
B for there because
The awkward internet talk at the same time. Gon, you speak first, and then Don, you will speak second.
Okay. I was aiming to have a Shimari on the bottom left corner that will extend to the middle and combine with the right corner.
Alright, so you're playing B because you're trying to combine with the enclosure in the top right? Is that what you said?
Sorry, I was looking at white. I'm burned on the other one. The other way around. I continue with Don and A corner. By the same reason.
Okay, so would you change the corner depending on which color you are?
No, I was just looking at the white stone, and I was saying I will do that for the. I was going to do the Shimari on the enclosure with the horse jump.
Okay, so
go to the B. Looking at the.
We're looking at these two, right? All right. So which one did you say you would pick?
Being black, the B corner.
Okay. And would you change it if you were white?
No, not in this position.
Okay. And the reason for you said the B corner, yes.
Yes.
Why?
My intention will be to play P17, do an enclosure, Shimari enclosure, and then do a big extension from that enclosure and combine it with the B.
Okay.
Have a strong right side border.
Okay, Don, what did you say?
I say the A corner.
Okay. Why?
It's bigger. you have more potential. White has reduced his size up on the lower side so that he would gain more by going to the A corner. I would also gain more as far as potential.
Okay, so can you reword that? Why is A bigger than B? Can you clarify?
A is bigger for B because it's you gain more territory or potential territory, and White has limited him. White can, if White goes to A, then he has potential for more space. If I go to A, I've increased my space and limited his potential so that he then has to go to.
Can you elaborate on what potential you're talking about? Because technically A and B are the exact same shape. They're both nothing's there, right? So it has to do with the other two stones. So what potential?
Okay, first doesn't change anything, but it actually makes it even better for me than I thought. So the thing is that my blackstone is reduced. It's gone on the 3-4 point. I was thinking it was at the 4-4 point. So at the 3-4 point, and then if I go to A, then I mean I think it would be completely equal if I go. How can I split this? If I drew a line from R16 to E3, there's less space. There's less space on the right side than on the left side. That's why I want to go to A, is because I feel that there's more squares and potential in that direction.
Okay. That's an interesting point. That if you draw this line, that this half is bigger than this half. I think that's a good point. My thinking actually is going to be looking at the Shamaris. It's actually interesting. I didn't think about the top left being actually wider than the bottom right, which is actually an interesting point. But here I'm thinking, what do I want to do? What am I prioritizing? Right? So just even this choice, even on our second move, you can see that there's actually, you can actually think quite a bit about this if you want to. If you want to, you can think quite a bit about this. So it just depends on what do I want. Okay, so if I'm just wanting to make my own combination, like Gon said, let's see, and I just go here, and then I make my combination. And then I just ignore white, and I just make my combination. Okay, that is a valid idea. Or I could also go up here and make the exact same combination. But this one, this stone is what's different. So let's compare that to that. See here, this stone is actually in a little bit better spot than here. The reason for that is because the left side is not as interesting, but that's where white wants to make the Shamari. But here, the left side is interesting. You can even make the Chinese opening shape. So the Shamari actually isn't that bad. So it's a very slight difference, but I would prefer this position over this one. However, let's imagine white says, I want to approach instead. And let's compare to this one. If white said, I want to approach instead. Now this one, I would prefer here. Because now, when I take the open corner, versus when I take the open corner, you can see this stone actually has a little bit of support, versus this stone, which does not. So all of a sudden, oh, well, maybe it's slightly different. But what if I change it and say instead of playing this one, I play this one? and you get all kinds of interesting things, right? So you can actually keep exploring this quite a lot, and I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I know exactly which one's best. Probably it's personal preference, but I want to broaden your horizons to think, okay, I have options here. I can think about more than just one thing. You can even approach right here and say the A corner and the B corner is Miai. This one I don't personally like because now white gets to choose and you have to go for the other one. So white's obviously going to choose that one and send you that one, and then you're the one who gets censored. So I don't like this one, but even that is something to consider, right? So the point is to not just play quickly, but really think about what do I want to focus on? What do I want to do? And kind of like just think longer than 2 seconds about it, right? That's kind of the idea. So in the game, you actually played this one. I'm actually not sure if I would like this one better or not, because if I was going to play this one, maybe this is better. Maybe this one is better than this one. So maybe I would go 1, 2, 3, 4 in my priority list. Maybe. But that might be my personal preference, but you could also study it with AI and everything else. But you can see that actually you have a lot to think about. And that's, again, just trying to encourage you guys to really don't play instantaneously. Really think about what do you want? All right, so white goes for the open corner. And you get to approach with support. So already, I really think that black is better. Because black gets to stop a Shamari with support. If I was white, I wouldn't like this. And so, even on white's first move, I don't like it. Because I think black gets to control stuff. I would rather play this one. Why? Because now, if we trade corners, you can see I actually don't have to worry about black getting support from this corner because I took it away from him. Versus if we played here, I get to approach with support. So even your very first move, you can have a personal preference. And you can start thinking about some strategies. Even your first move. Like everyone constantly plays the same moves over and over and over. We all start at like these 4 points pretty much. But I really want you to think about, why do you pick one over the other? Why do you pick the 3-4? Why do you pick the 4-4? What type of game are you wanting to play? And I'm not going to tell you that there's one correct answer. I'm just trying to encourage you to think about it. What do you want? What kind of game do you want? And that's where you start developing style. Okay? Alright, so you're going high. So we did approach and white did choose the Joseki here. Okay? So here you chose high instead of low. So our first instinct is always going to be third line. 2 stones jumps 3, our first instinct is always going to be third line. So, you chose fourth line. So, what do you hope to gain? What type of game are you wanting to play by making it fourth line instead of third line?
Oh, personally, I kind of know this player. I know that he's more an influenced kind of player.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aiming to fight that with him just from the beginning.
Okay. Okay.
I want to apologize real quick too because I didn't realize this was his game.
No, this is an open discussion, so you're fine. This isn't a game review. This is us talk. Just he gave us an example to work with to discuss making choices in Josekis. So you're good. Feel free to comment if you want to. So you're saying I want to stop influence, yes? What about this move?
Yes. But a little insecure by his invasion on the D8 or D7. D8 probably.
Okay, so invasions are usually in the third line, so we're going to consider this one first. This one is more basic. Invasions on the third line, approach a fourth line stone. These are the first ones we consider. Then we consider the others. Okay, so you're worried about an invasion. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. What's wrong with the invasion here? What's the difference? Boom, boom. They can both be invaded.
Can both be invaded, but the cornerstone is farther away. It still has space to develop to both sides. Mind the other one is the 2 stones on the fifth line.
Okay, so you're saying A is too problematic?
No, I say that like that they're a bit more compromised.
Okay.
The other one, I feel like I can still make a base or make a strong group.
Okay. Does this have any pros though? So the con is A gets less support. Is there any pros? Over here?
It's already been inserted.
What about here?
The other stone is too far away to be considered a pincer, and you have to do something about that one.
Yep. So this one says I'm putting more emphasis on, or I'm putting a little bit more emphasis to help B, the B section, and I'm going to let A be a little bit weaker. So maybe if you're inviting your opponent in to attack him or to start a fight because you think you have confidence in your fighting ability, maybe you'll choose this one. Or if you say, I don't really want to fight without strength, I don't want a complex fight because I don't want to rely on my reading, I want a basics fight, then you choose the one that has the base. And then you can create a more basic shape. And the follow-ups are a lot more basic, but doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. It's just mean this is the follow-ups are more basic. You're attacking with I shape instead of something that's a lot more complex. Right? All of a sudden, we have a choice in style. Make sense?
Quite interesting.
Okay. So whatever you think about this, I really want you thinking. Like I already like that you had the choice between A and B, and you're like, oh, I know this player. He likes to go for influence, so I'm going to try to cancel out his influence a little bit. I already like that. You're already thinking about what does it mean? What type of game is going to happen? And then you get like choices like this and this, and then this, and then just straight up Tanukis like here and here. And all of a sudden, you have so much freedom to ask yourself, what type of game do I want to play? And what's actually important here is don't actually pick one of these options without understanding what's going to happen, because if you don't understand the follow-ups, just play here. So if you're like double digit cube, probably you should just play here. But as soon as you get to like single digit cube, more ideally like 5Q plus, and you start thinking what type of game do I want to play, you open up a lot more options. So maybe double digit Q, I'd start here, and then after I get comfortable with this one, I'd start thinking, okay, maybe I want to deal with influence, so I'd go here. Which you're 9Q, so I think this is actually the right idea. Is you're starting to choose between these two. That's already really good progress. You're starting to think about your choices, and then as you get stronger and stronger and stronger, more and more and more options come about. I guess I should put H as well because the common meta. So you get more and more and more options. I think it can get quite fun. So here, all right. So why did you choose? You chose A over B. Also, you chose third line over fourth line. Any particular reason?
Felt that I could take the advantage from having the group right there to make some territory while pincering. But I didn't want to do it too thick.
Okay. So you're focusing a little bit more on the territory with a light pincer. What about here? Doesn't that do as well?
It does it as well. I thought it would be that I could go a line higher.
Okay. What's the difference? The difference is this Aji right here. Is this okay?
I guess I could deal with that because in the worst case scenario, I still have influence over the middle game, which was the first idea.
One right here. You said you're wanting territory instead of influence. You said.
I say that I could take advantage of the pincer to gain territory on that side, since I have 7 stones already. But I was ready to trade it by influence if he invited the
Okay. So this is more like I'm gonna get some points, but I'm willing to be flexible. You could also say, I want to put maximum pressure. It's just a matter of what statement do you want to make. Okay, white jumps. You play defense. You have the option between A and B, which has to do with some follow-ups at C. Goes tight. Okay. Your opponent ignores. Okay, now we get even more options. So who wants to throw out some options?
I'll throw. You have the option of securing your territory, say at H17, or
Here?
you can, or you can possibly go out even and block them off completely, but possibly going to knight's move G15.
Okay.
And then you also have the option of going.
Well, let's let other people say some options too.
Okay.
Anyone else have options?
I would say piece 17
Okay.
or O17
Okay.
to attack and make territory.
Okay. Anyone else?
Ignore completely and go on the right side.
Ignore completely, go where?
Like right side player like R6 or an approach to the
Here?
bottom corner.
So you're saying Tanuki?
Yes.
As another option,
I
yeah.
feel like
Okay. Ooh. What about here and here? Maximum pressure.
Yeah. F looks good.
So I'll go through these. So my least favorites are going to be E, because you don't really approach a Shamari on this side, especially one space away. Because if you go right here, and I just defend, you actually have to defend as well because you're super close to thickness, and it's very easy to invade because of it. So usually you approach it from 2 spaces away. So it's a little bit more flexible.
And to me, that seems like definitely the worst option because you have no. It's like you're playing on the least interested side. You don't really have, and white is completely able to do whatever he wants.
So this point, actually, right here, is actually a very important point that I think a lot of players.
Which point?
This turn. This turn for black is actually quite important because whatever you decide is probably going to decide the next 10 to 15 moves. So if you've ever been to a tournament and you see Dawn players, you see that they take quite a while in the opening. This is actually a difficult choice. Now, online, we'll probably just pick one that just looks good. But in a tournament, this is going to decide the next 10 or 15 moves. So this is actually quite a tough choice. So right here is a good time to use probably 1 to 2 minutes and start rolling them out. So let's talk about what do they mean. Well, E means I'm going to play on the right and just play a big move, and my opponent gets a Shamari. Personally, I don't like E, but okay, that's what it says. F says I'm going to stop a Shamari. I'm going to ignore this weakness and leave it and just go play a big move and stop a Shamari. I really like C and D, simply because you're making a Shamari in territory while applying pressure on the stone. I also really like B, because it says, you ignored your weak group, I'm going to punish you and attack. A and H are also kind of good, because it bullies the stone a little bit while making sure that your group is okay, but probably a little bit unnecessary, because you have this move, you have all these moves, and you can run away, so these 2 stones don't feel that weak. So I would prefer C or D over A or H. Now G, I'm surprised no one said, because G puts the maximum pressure you can put without touching. However, if you can make territory while doing it, it's usually better. C is probably not as good as D, because you still want to put as much pressure as you can, and C just puts so little pressure on it that you can potentially ignore C completely. So you still want to make them respond. So probably out of these three, I would pick D. Probably wouldn't pick these two. And I would say the choices that I would pick between would be here, here, and just for this, I'll say this here, here, and then maybe one of these two. But probably I would be between these two. This is what I would be between. Either make the Shamari and then cut and start a fight. I think these are really big. If I was going to play a big move, probably these two would be good. However, he ignored a weak group, and he made another weak group, or another group that could be bullied. So I really want to attack stuff. So I would say I would like the attacking idea here. But does everyone kind of understand, like, what these letters mean, what they do?
Yeah.
I do.
Yes.
Okay, and that's kind of the important point. Once you can give yourself options and understand what they do, it's just a matter of thinking, what kind of game do I want? Now, if you want to be a Tanuki-holic, then you can just keep Tanukiing a lot, but eventually you're going to have to attack, so you need to... This is why I think this is a good attack timing. Yeah, what's your question?
Yeah, I was thinking on your maximum point G, and my first thought is that white is able to make a two-space extension on the left,
Mm-hmm.
and
And then you split.
You have black stones on both sides,
Uh-huh.
and white is committed. Then at that point, it seems you have to go out at, say, somehow, usually something like L15 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's not strong enough to survive with the black stones.
Technically, this is a two-space gap, so it doesn't quite apply exactly how we talked about in our lessons.
G was the one space gap.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is this example. And normally with this, yes, white usually really wants to respond. However, because there's two weak groups, we have to apply a little bit more complex logic and ask ourselves which one is the weakest. So A is probably the weakest. But yes, usually if A was strong, you would want to respond with the B group for sure. But because we have two weak groups, it's going to be a balance and actually quite difficult. Which is the pro of that one. Going here, white is definitely not going to respond to B. White's going to respond to A for at least this turn, because technically you still have this move. So it's a little bit more complex than what we've talked about, because there's two weak groups and not one. And with two weak groups, the game becomes even more complex for white in this case. So it's not a simple. It's not a simple response for white. So even here, just choosing between like D and G, it would probably take me like a minute to 2 minutes just to decide between those two moves. Because do I want the territory? Do I want more pressure? How do I expect this to play out? And then you also have like B. And your opponent wants to respond, but there's also like this. And you're like, oh, but what about that? And if you read this and visualize it, this should be clearly bad for white. But you have to like consider these things, right? Like, what if they can force it? What if this stone gets stronger in Sente and does something like that? Well, can I punish? Is this okay, or is it not okay? Right? You have to start thinking about that, and it gets really complex really fast. So here it's just a matter of what type of game you want to play. And personally, I think this is a good timing to attack. So I think there's two weaknesses on the board for white. Black seems pretty strong all around, so I think now would be a good attack timing. But if you wanted to Tanuki, you technically could. But probably it's a little bit more passive style, which I think is not the current meta, but not necessarily wrong. Not my preference, but not wrong. Alright, now we're going here. So now we have another choice. So you chose to not attack white. So you're choosing a very, very non-aggressive game, which is interesting considering you're going for Moyo. You also went for the fourth line again. And I'm not sure if I agree with this one. So let's talk about why. So here you went for influence. You wanted some control of the center. Okay? Then you got some territory, and your opponent ran away. You got some more territory, your opponent ran away. You got some more territory, your opponent ran away. And now you're going for influence again. However, choosing influence right here, when you've been playing 3 moves for territory, you're choosing not to attack right now. And there's a white stone right there. So if you're not attacking this shape, there's not really a moyo. So what this stone tells me is that you want to attack, because there's no moyo. There's white stones right there. There's no moyo. If you don't attack anything, you're not going to get anything here. So it tells me that you want to attack, but in that case, why not just attack? If you want to attack, just do it. If you don't want to attack and you want points, get points. So here it says you still want the center, but what does the center mean? The center usually means getting control of an area so you can attack something. So I feel like I personally disagree with this particular idea here because there's already something to attack, so why would you not attack it? Why would you set up a position to attack something when there's already something to attack? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Alright. Again, not necessarily your move's wrong, I just preferred to attack white here. Alright, white plate here.
Interesting point only is that I sometimes consider is how many stones are on the 4th line and how many stones are on the third line. So I like to kind of try to keep it balanced somehow. So I might consider that it was more balanced by playing at 4th.
There's such a thing as balance. There's also like the type that you can just make all your moves on the 4th line and go like Takamiya style. So you can actually get really, really creative and go. It's just a matter of creativity, right? So there's actually not really any one right answer in Go. If we've learned anything, if you look at Go history, if you learned anything, it's that every 5 years the Joseikis change and the openings change. So that means there's got to be more than one right answer, because you can't just say, oh, the right answers are updated every 5 to 10 years. No, this game's 4,000 years old. You can't just update information. You can just try new things, right? So it's more about your own preferences, the current meta, and everything else, and what you're exposed to as well. Because it's not just you that creates an opening, it's your opponent as well. So even if you have a particular style, your opponents will respond in a certain way. We call that the current meta, unless you get a very unique player. So you have a common thing that you're playing against. And so maybe you pick a particular style. And this is one thing that I actually used early AI. I actually reviewed a lot of Shuzoku games because I found that style really effective against the AI copycat style. This was in 2019. I was using Shuzoku style, like the old, I love my Invincible Shuzoku book. I was replaying a bunch of his games and using those old patterns, shapes, and Joseikis because it was really effective against the AI wannabe style because they didn't really understand how to use it. They weren't the AI. So me getting a bunch of territory and solid shapes was just crushing them. And then I ended up playing in an online tournament, went 5-0 with that style as well. So I was really happy about it, right? But thinking about styles and stuff, that's what I was doing at a Dawn level in a tournament. And that you guys can think about that too. Like, why do you pick certain Joseikis? What works? What style is currently happening? Like, what Joseiki choices are currently happening? And then think, okay, if you do a lot of study, like replaying games from different ages in history, you might actually play around with some ideas and say, what about this particular opening? Maybe Sanrensei works in this decade, and I get really good with it, and it just crushes a lot of people. Maybe the meta changes again, and maybe Kobayashi comes back and starts dominating again. Maybe a certain type of style, maybe like a lot of people like this shape, well, maybe a regular Shamari instead of the 2-space high Shamari is more effective against the current meta, or maybe the two-space Ishimari is more effective. You never know, right? You can actually play around with a lot of ideas and be very creative with it. It's limited by your own creativity. As long as you do the research and understand what is possible and what things mean, you can get really creative with what type of game that you want to play. Maybe a super passive style like this, where you just never attack your opponent until like you get super strong. I don't think it's super powerful, but if you wanted to and it worked, then maybe that could be your style that is just attacking. Maybe at 9Q it's like super effective, right? Maybe it's like, oh no, attack them like after move 50. It's super effective. They just die because they never ignore, and then I'm just too strong and they can't do anything. Like, it might work, right? We're not professional players. At 9Q, this style might work. And that's up to you to do your research and practice. But I would personally attack that. Okay, so we're actually Tanukiing again. And this one you actually ignored A bit. Technically, your opponent did take your base. So technically you open up an invasion point. So it means you are playing a super territorial game. So maybe it's actually not that your opponent goes for influence, it's that you go for so much territory that your opponent only gets influence. Because you keep ignoring everything and just taking the points, taking the big points. You just keep ignoring everything, taking the big points. So if you look at it, what does white have? Right here and right here. So white has to get the center and attack stuff because you took away all the big points. So you actually might be forcing him to get Moyo. Even though you're like, he gets Moyo a lot, so I'm trying to prevent it. You actually might be forcing him to get Moyo. That's something you can like think about in your games. Alright, so he kicks and then jumps and make a base. Yep, good for you. And now he's going for the center. Alright, I didn't want to get into attack and defense because that would be a full game review at that point, and that's not really the point of today. It's just talking about choices and what they mean and how to make them and stuff. But yeah, like there's attack here. This stone's weak. Yeah, so you actually defend a lot, and then he ends up with some center, and you try to reduce. So you actually never attacked, so think about that. Try to think about that. Like, maybe it's not that your opponents are getting influence, maybe it's that you're giving them influence, or you're making them play influence. It could be that as well. Food for thought. Yeah, food for thought. But that would take more research, because I'm only seeing this game, so it would take more research and more play, but yeah.
I almost want to consider, but like in this case for white, to try to get to G18. Because then, it's pretty secure that way. And it also...
yeah, white's position's very flimsy, unfortunately.
But he would be getting a little bit of top side points, plus he would be limiting, forcing black to do something.
Yeah. One thing I'm noticing about this white player, like you said, you're trying to fix stuff. White is leaving a lot of shape openings. So that's one thing that white could learn is more solid connections.
I guess.
Yeah, you're thinking about it because you see the problems. Well, the problem is the problems shouldn't exist because you should play better shapes, right? But it's easier than that. Like, for example, this move, right? What about here instead? That's already better shape. So it's just a matter of like more knowledge. But the more you Tanuki weak groups and the more you Tanuki during fights, the more complex the game becomes, and you need more creative shapes and stuff. But that's more middle game stuff. So let's go ahead and look at another game. Someone else have a game?
If I can send a SGF to you, then yes.
Do you know how to upload it to OGS?
I don't really know, but I can try.
Do you have an OGS account?
I do.
Okay, so just go up here to the top left, and then just go to your SGF library, and click Upload.
Alright, I'll quickly...
And then you can just copy paste the URL link on the game. Like, after you upload it, just click on it, and then just send us the link. It's just easier for us if you have that.
I put it in Clossi.
All right. All right.
Review started.
Okay, open corners. Choosing knee Rensei, going for some influence. And we played the top side. All right. So why did you pick A over B? And for that matter, over C? So you played an extension. Go ahead.
I think it's easier to invade on d4 later on than on d17. So I try to approach that a little bit earlier with A.
Okay. So this one's actually slightly incorrect, I think, because the way you want to think about the difference between A and B is the B side has 2 fourth line, which means 2 unsettled sides, and the top side has a third line and a fourth line, so this one is half settled. If you want to deal with D17, you approach it from this side because this is where the Shamari is going to be. So if you approach it A, then it's kind of like telling Black that, hey, making a Shamari is not going to work here because I've already blocked it. So he's going to go here instead. So playing, giving White that option, White could also like go here. Giving White that option and letting White choose what type of position he wants usually isn't recommended. So usually if we want to play on top, it's here because we can close the corner and then make this side third line. It's just no one wants it now, right? So extending from the A is saying I want to make the top interesting while also limiting your potential, your extension potential. But White doesn't have extension potential yet, and B has a lot more extension potential. So if we choose A, B, or like that, I would say White looks slightly better, simply because star point extension, stopping this extension, star point extension, this one doesn't need to extend. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so also third line, fourth line, this one should be better. Technically, according to the Clossi approach, you would want to play on the left because it's the widest, and there's 2 fourth lines. So the difference between this is, I believe, 10. Is that 10? No. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 11. Okay, so that's 11, and that's 12. And this is fourth line. So technically, the Clossi approach would tell us to play on the left. And it would say to approach the 3-4 point because a Shamari enclosure is bigger than a star point enclosure. Because the star point is still invadable, a Shamari is not. So it actually would tell us to approach here. Or here. Okay. Technically, not bad. I mean, doesn't really matter. It's not like it's a huge mistake. If you're pro level, maybe it's a mistake. But not bad. Just more things to think about in the future. Okay. Now we played here. Alright, so we're playing a played an extension and then a big move. Just for funsies, we're going to look at the difference between A and B. Now, what do these moves do? Okay, so first off, you have to have C and D. Every single one of those moves, every single one of those moves is pressuring this white stone by stealing its base. So if we go here, White has to make a 2-space extension for a base. You could also make 3-space, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So White makes a base, and that's your position. You can also go here. White makes a base. That's your position. Or you can make a Knight's move to get a little bit more focused on territory. White plays here. And it's a little bit less pressure, but also still technically takes the 2-space. Same with here. However, I think this one is much more interesting than the Knight's move here, because this Knight's move has some territory with an extension. It's almost like a Shamari with an extension. Not quite, but similar. But if you play this one...
blocks the corner.
Yeah, but this one, you have this, and it doesn't really have the extension yet. So now, maybe you might lose it. So you go here, and white pincers, and all of a sudden you lost it, right? But here, it's a nice, decent little combination. But what about here? Isn't that just bigger? But this one has a double wing. And if you know anything about the star point, a star point with 2 low extensions becomes very vulnerable at the 3-3. Because after you play the 3-3, A or B will be in a bad position. One of those two will be bad. So, you actually don't want a double wing. That's why you go here. And now, it's a ko. Here. And that one is not really bad, because this one's in a good spot. It's just a ko. But here, white will live immediately, and one of those 2 stones will be bad. So, we choose this one. Yeah, so some interesting thoughts there, just to look at. Another idea you can do is to say, I want to push here, because that's not a double wing. In order to say, when my opponent goes here, I can go here. And now you make that shape, that combination. Maybe.
Could also go to our 15 even, black, right?
This one would be a little, maybe, but that can get complex really quick if your opponent wants to start a fighting game. I always tell you guys not to make 2 weak groups because it's very dangerous and difficult. But it's not like it's not a possible strategy. It's just I highly discourage it until like dawn level because it's really dangerous.
I was suggesting to do it. It's that I was looking at the weakness of the white group on the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was what I was thinking.
Another cool point. I said I wasn't going to talk about this, but I guess I will. Is there is a Joseki right here? This. Yeah. So this is a side Joseki. So if we compare this to, let's just mirror it on the other side. Alright, this one and where'd it go? Here. Okay, so which one do you think looks better?
Bottom one.
This one?
Oh, white is sealed in. Never mind.
Not completely sealed in, but you can see the shape here. Like, look at the difference right here versus right here. Black is lower and everything else. Compared to right here, black is higher, and it looks a lot better, right? So,
but if white could manage to take it with 1 stone and make it secure,
well,
okay.
The point is, if you know this Joseki, this is a side Joseki, a single digit Joseki. If you know the Joseki and you realize that this stone exists, you might actually choose to play 1 here instead of this one, because the finish of the Joseki is slightly better for black than it would have been down here, simply because you're higher, you have a little bit more points, and you're surrounding white at a little bit better shape. So because it's just slightly better shape, you might pick one over the other. And you'll actually find this a lot in a lot of positions. Sometimes Josekis will have a certain pattern, but 1 stone different might make one Joseki pattern better than another, simply because of this 1 extra stone. And so you start getting choices between like C and D or A and D, right? And you start getting those choices, and you start thinking, okay, with this particular stone, which one do I think looks better, like C or D? And obviously C is not good because we talked about that, so obviously D is better. But then you also have the choice of A and D. You're like, okay, with this stone, which one looks better? So you can actually take other stones into account when looking at your Joseki and say, which Joseki works with the stones on the board? And I like to call that playing the board. Don't play the local position, but play the board. Don't say, I want this Joseki to happen. Say, what Joseki has a good relationship with the other stones on the board? Does that make sense? Yeah, play the... Play the board. So when you learn Josekis, don't just learn Josekis. Think about Josekis are just tools. What tool do you need for this board position? What tool do you need for that board position? And every single game is unique. Every single game is different. Alright. So we are running a little bit out of time. So does anyone have any questions? Or I don't think I taught anything new. I think I'm just more exploring this idea of choices and understanding what these choices can say. But does anyone have any questions?
No.
Not in the amount of time we have.
Don likes to go into detail.
Yeah, he always has questions. Okay, so I think like last week we talked about Josekis and Joseki choices. This week we kind of explored what your choices can mean, and I think that's really I think the big thing I want you to take away from this is Go has a lot of freedom, and I think it's what's appealing to a lot of people. The difficult part about being a double-digit queue, I would say, is you feel restricted because either one, you're absolutely lost, or two, you have these core concepts, and if you leave them, your game falls apart. So Go has all this freedom, right? So how do you get that freedom? How do you get access to it? Because if you're too free, it's bad. If you're too free, your position goes to crap. But how do you give yourself this freedom? You have to give yourself options. You have to give yourself tools. And what do I mean by tools? I mean, how many Josekis do you have access to on a given position? How many Josekis do you know? How many Joseki results do you know? How many Josekis do you have access to? How many opening patterns do you have access to? And if you review pro games, which I encourage you to do, specifically, I actually encourage you to replay pro games from all kinds of eras, not just one particular era. But let's say you review pro games on a regular basis. Maybe those certain patterns from that era work on one board position, but on another board position you're like, maybe these patterns. Or maybe you fancy a certain style that a certain player plays. Like I know a lot of people used to be very interested in Takemiya Masaki's games. He's very influence-oriented, very center-oriented, and so they would play positions to get that. So maybe you have a favorite pro that has a certain style that you like. Like, okay, well, how can you imitate that style? Well, what Joseki does he do? What is the goal of his Josekis? What is he after? Is he after the center? He's not playing the same Joseki every single time. It's more the same plan, and he picks the Josekis that go to that plan, right? And that's what makes a style. So it's like, what Josekis does he typically use against certain positions? And then try to think how you can do that. So, yeah, the AI might tell you, like, one move's better than another move, blah, 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 right? Who freaking cares? We can have fun because we are amateurs. This is one thing that we have that professional players do not. And it's the luxury of playing bad moves. Because pro players can't do it. They'll lose. But we can do it and get away with it because we don't have to play perfectly. Because we're not going to win or lose a game by 1 point or 2 point mistakes. We're going to lose a game by 5 to 10 to 20 point mistakes. So we have the luxury of being free. So even this move, I think this move is not very meta. So maybe it's like -1 or 2 points, maybe -1 point at most. I can actually test that. But we have the freedom to not worry about it. And that's the idea. So let's just play this real quick. It was boom, 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 boom. Okay, so this move is... looks like half a point. Not even a point. Not even a point. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, we have all these theories, right? We have all these theories. Like, my Clossi approach would say this is not the ideal move, right? We have theories that we can apply, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? The theories from 200 years ago, or maybe 100 years ago, I forget exactly when Go Seigen made the star point happen, but the theories from a long time ago said the star point was a bad move. The start point was bad. Okay? You know what else? The 3-3 in the opening was bad. Everyone knew it. Everyone knew that the 3-3 in the opening is bad. And now, everyone knows this Hane's bad. So imagine what everyone will know in 5 years. The way you get freedom is you give yourself options. You study different eras, you study different Josekis, you give yourself options, and then your choices from those options is what will represent your style. I would say the key to making a good, strong, solid style is consistency in your choices. Like if you're going for influence to attack something, then be consistent with that and with your other choices. Like if you make a choice for territory and then make a choice for influence, then make a choice for territory, make a choice for influence, maybe you're playing a balanced game. But if you make a choice for territory and then 3 choices for influence, is that really consistent? Think about what style you want and think about what Joseki choices can make that consistency, and then see what games come about. Give yourself freedom and then figure out what to do with that freedom, like what works for you, and you can actually create a very, very interesting game for yourself. Alright, and with that, we will go ahead and wrap that up here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the class.
Thank you.
I did. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.